Thanks for having me. This is really cool workshop. Is this good? Okay, great. Um, yeah, let me make this go away. So I want to tell you about some work that we've been doing in collaboration with lots of folks, my colleagues at Janelia, folks at Google DeepMind. And I want to call out Roman Baxenberg and Igor Siwanowicz in particular for a lot of this work rests on their um, big shoulders. And then also collaborators here in the audience, including Elliot. Now, this is about a simulation we built, physics simulation of the fruit fly, the entire body of the fruit fly. So let me walk you through that. I'll tell you about my personal motivation. So we've been interested, I've been interested in connectomics for, I guess 20 years since my PhD when we first started mapping connectomes. And now that we have connectomes finally, it's a very exciting time and we want to build simulations using that. And one of the things that we worked on in recent years is machine learning methods to be able to build simulations of connectomes. And one of the techniques that I'm very excited about is this idea of using task optimization, the technique that folks in NeuroAI have been using for quite some time for building connectome-constrained simulations. And we were successful in building a simulation of the motion pathways of the fly visual system using the fruit fly connectome and predicting from um, these connectomic measurements you make in a dead brain neural activity in the living brain, which is very exciting way to generate hypotheses from this wealth of data. And the way that works is you have a connectome constrained simulation, and if you know something about what the task is that circuit is presumably involved in, then you can use task optimization to optimize the unknown parameters. And so what that looks like is you need to know the inputs and the outputs of what the circuit might be trying to do at a high level. Now, if you know that, then you can do this. And um, now, the exciting thing is that since we did this work, we now have a connectome for the entire fly nervous system, which is super exciting. And the cool thing about it is it's just 160 odd thousand neurons, right? That's fewer neurons than AlexNet. Who here knows what AlexNet is? Hopefully everybody. And so that's far fewer neurons than AlexNet, and it can do so much. It can move the body around in highly agile ways. It can, fly. It can see the world, and react. It can court females. So much that it can do with very few neurons. And so my dream would be that we build a simulation of the entire nervous system. I mean, that's a dream, but let's see how far we can get. And so if we wanted to use this idea of task optimization or input-output optimization at the scale of the entire nervous system, we need to know what the inputs are, what the outputs are. And of course, the inputs to the nervous system come from the sensory system, and the motor system is the outputs of the nervous system. And all these inputs and outputs come from the body. And that's the brain's way of having an impact on the world, on its environment, is through the body. And so the body matters, and we need to embody the connectome in order to be able to make progress on building simulations at this scale. And so I want to tell you about our work on building the body model that we've been building, but I should note that we were not the first to build a whole body model for the fruit fly. In fact, the first was Pavan Ramjia's lab. And in fact, by the time we had our very first version of our model, they had two models already, version 1 and 2. And now they have an even newer version. But I'll tell you about the work that we've been doing. It starts with Igor Sivanowicz, who's my colleague, who's maybe one of the world's best insect anatomists. He imaged, what he calls a disassembled fly, the different body parts in 3D. And then what he does is he then extracts surface meshes from each of these body parts in Blender. And then in Blender, he's able to rig them up into a 3D model of the geometry of the body. So here we have every body part that, and then how they're connected to each other in terms of their geometry. And then we collaborated with colleagues at Google DeepMind who had built this, the Mujoko physics engine. And they were really excited about this project. And in fact, they thought, you know what, the fly flies. Mujoko doesn't have a fluid simulator that allows it to fly. Let's add something. And so they added, for this project, a phenomenological fluid model that basically says if you take a wing and then you flap it around, how much force does it, how much lift and how much drag does it generate? And so it's a very effective sort of phenomenological model. This is not real fluid dynamics, but maybe it's enough to sort of allow for realistic flapping to generate enough lift and drag in order for it to fly in a realistic way. So that was a question. And I think I'll show you results. So now that it was in this physics simulation, we have a physics simulation. We thought, hey, time for some reinforcement learning. This is what you do, right? You have a robot or a simulation of a robot. That's kind of what we have in this physics engine. We started to do reinforcement learning, and we thought, let's try to get it to walk. Let's try to get it to fly. And it was a huge success. This is the controllers that it generated. Here it is walking forward at a constant speed that's given to it, and it's able to do it. And there it is flying along this trajectory. Pretty, sort of trajectories that we believe flies should be able to fly, and it's able to do this. And so how is it doing this? I mean, this is nowhere near the way that the fly flies, right? And so it can do it, but not in a realistic way. And so what is the realistic way? And how do we get this simulation to do it in the realistic way? So we scratched our heads for a while and we tried all kinds of things. We said, oh, well, energy, it's probably got to be really smart about how it's using its energy expenditure, and maybe that will sort of help us. Oh, maybe there's noisy observations. Maybe we need to add noise to the sensory observations. Maybe there's motor noise. We thought about a few things, and we always thought like, okay, the next thing we try is surely the thing that will make this work. And we didn't really get anywhere in the time. And so that's when we realized, we had this realization that maybe that wasn't the right way of going about this. Our goal at the end of the day, for those of us like me who are interested in understanding how the connectome produces the real behavior that the fly performs, is not, what are all the possible ways of fly locomotion, but how does the fly, what's the nervous system doing when the fly walks or flies the way it actually does? And so that requires that instead of trying to get this to do and discover the optimal principles behind why it walks the way it does, why does it even have 6 legs? It could locomote with 1 leg. It could fly, well, maybe not with 1 wing. You could imagine all kinds of things. But there's probably evolutionary reasons for why, this, and all the constraints that underlie the way it behaves the way it does. That's an exciting research program. We decided to sidestep that. So what we said is we can use real data. So we can go in the lab, and this is collaborators, colleagues, Kristen Branson's lab at Janelia. They've been imaging fly behavior for decades now, world's experts. And so they have tons of data like this, where you can watch flies crawling around. And so can we train our controller to crawl in the same way that these real flies do? And the answer is yes. Technical details aside, which really we would love full 3D kinematic pose tracking. This was just 2D, and so we had to make up some data, but it looks more reasonable than. And so here is the controller making the fly in a closed loop crawl in the same along the same trajectory that a real fly crawled along. And does it do it in the same way? Well, fly gait patterns have been studied for a long time. And so there's a lot that's known about how it flies, how it crawls at different speeds, how it turns. There's a tripod gait and a tetrapod gait, depending on the speed. This is what's known as a gait diagram. And so these have been studied. And it's known that flies, as you go faster and faster, they have fewer legs on the ground. And so we looked at, what does our controller do? And it matches really nicely. There's coordination patterns, which is what is the phase lag between different legs. So these are polar plots showing that. Again, there's a good match. We can train these controllers to imitate that really nicely. Then there's questions about how it turns and stride lengths differences as for turning and so on. Now, we tried the same thing for flight. So for flight, there's really awesome data from Michael Dickinson's lab from like 10 years ago now, using multiple cameras and tracking a fly sort of flying along and then gets startled, and then it performs an extreme evasive maneuver, which looks like this. So these are challenging flight trajectories. So we can take these real flight trajectories and ask, can we train up a controller to imitate that? With imitation learning, the answer is yes. And so here is a fly that's trying to follow exactly the trajectory that a real fly produced in Michael Dickinson's lab at Caltech, like, 10 plus years ago. And our model fly is doing this. And not only does it get the position, it also gets the orientation of the fly, right? And in fact, it is actually flying sideways. This is what happens. This is a real sort of physical phenomenon when you have tiny insects. As the animal gets smaller, I guess fluid dynamics, those of you who know more can teach me. I think Elliot knows more. It's a little bit like it's swimming in air. And so it's able to match that with the realistic kinematics, which I can plot here, which is, I'm showing you the wing angles, and those have been characterized on average. These are average statistics, average across, lots of wing strokes, but also lots of different flies that have different sizes and shapes, within reason. And so what this shows is that the fly, our model fly, is able to flap its wings in a manner that's very similar to the way that the real fly does, and produce the same trajectory. And so that means that the physics is reasonable in order to, a reasonable match in order for flapping the wings in the correct way to produce the correct sort of translocation through space. And then, we had some fun. This is just fun, I think, at this point. We said, now we have these steerable controllers, as we call them, where you can tell it, here's the trajectory, follow that trajectory. And so what that is, you're just telling it what you want the center of mass position and orientation to look like. And the animal has to decide exactly how to move all of its degrees of freedom and actuate them. And so one of the tasks we said is, here, use your visual system. This simulation also has a visual system. Use your visual system to navigate and through this ravine and try not to crash into the walls. That's the top. At the bottom, flies like to maintain a particular height above the ground. They don't like to blow off all the way or go too close to the surface. So this is, again, visually regulating your height. And so the way this is done is, again, we have this pre-trained low-level controller And then there's a high-level controller that uses the visual system and then steers the low-level controller. And that also, it's able to do this. Okay, so all of that was prelude to kind of basically demonstrating that maybe that we have a reasonable simulation of the physics of the body, and it's able to perform behaviors both on the ground and in the air. And that required that we correctly model both the body of the fly as well as how it interacts with its environment. But we did all this with a black box neural network because our goal was really to characterize a physics simulation, not really, yet the connectome. But of course, that's what we care about, And so in order to get that to work, now, the next question was, okay, how exactly does one of these motor neurons control one of the degrees of freedom in our body? Well, that's through muscles. So it'd be great if we knew exactly which motor neuron controls which muscles. And actually, it would be great if it had muscles in the first place in order to drive the actuation, because that would be much more realistic. Similarly, for the sensory system, it'd be great to put in the real sensory system. And so this has been something that my colleagues at Janelia, through a project team, have been working on. And so I'll tell you that work, and this is in collaboration with Bing Brunton and John Tuttle's labs. So this is a visualization of all the leg muscles that we've put in. There's also now muscles for the neck, for the proboscis, for the antennae, and more that we're adding in. And then figuring out what the dynamics need to be for the body to actually produce the behaviors that you get to see. Now that was on the motor side. This is on the sensory side. The fly has these bristles all over its body in a highly stereotyped manner. And there's these sites, we can annotate them, and these are the sites of touch. And then there's various other sensors as well within each joint that can report various proprioceptive signals. And so we're also adding those into this body model. And so this is all in preparation for adding the connectome. We don't yet have that, but that's where we're headed. So my dream, again, is to now imagine, now that we have a simulation of the entire body, we have a connectome for the entire nervous system, can we bring this together with all the other measurements that we've made as a community over maybe a decade or more, neural activity measurements, behavior measurements, and build a, I want to use the word mechanistic foundation model, because really I think of this as a way of integrating all the measurements that we have across the various scales up and down into one model. But of course, when you say foundation model, people think about artificial neural networks, and that's not what we mean. It's really a digital twin where every neuron and every synapse in our model has a one-to-one correspondence with a real neuron and synapse in the fly nervous system. And again, every body part has a one-to-one correspondence, and muscle and sensor has a one-to-one correspondence. And so this is the dream. I would be very excited to collaborate with people who want to help make this happen. Thank you.
That's so fun. Thanks, Srini. When you're thinking of the correspondence between brain neurons and simulation neurons, how close are you hoping to get? Like if you have one neuron with real dendrites and active, like internal states and all that versus a prelude neuron or whatever you want to use, how close do you think you need to be?
Yeah, so the best place where we understand this is in the fly visual system from the work that we've done. And there we have found that, so we started with point neurons and passive point neurons with current synapses. And we got reasonable predictions. But we found that as we are slowly ramping up the biophysical complexity, we'll actually get better predictions. And so far, how far we've gotten is we do compartmentalize some large neurons. We have started modeling conductance synapses, and that's those synapses have nonlinearities in the synapses, synaptic nonlinearities there, and those have improved our predictions. And so, how far do we keep going? This is actually, for the first time, I think we have a way of asking these questions and answering them in a very machine learning-y way. Not just, oh, I think this neuron has all this morphology. Let me just build a full compartmental model. But like, we can ask, as we increase the complexity and add each biophysical feature, how does it change the predictions at the network level, at the level of how do single neuron and single synapse biophysical properties, what level do we need to model that? I think we can answer this.
Very interesting talk. So you have been able to reproduce the biological behavior using a non-biological network. And one question is that what was kind of the number of free parameters that you had in your artificial neural network? And also, if the artificial neural network was able to reproduce the same behavior, now when you compare it to a biological network, do you think that kind of related to the previous studies would be kind of only the amount of the energy that is kind of being preserved, or other mechanisms that are also involved?
Yeah, those are two very good questions. So let me take the first one. I just want to set the expectations here. So what we actually did was we trained one controller for walking, a separate controller for flying. So this is not one controller for all the behaviors that the fly performs. And so I think, really, I wouldn't try to match this to the real brain. For your second question, now remind me again.
Comparing the amount of the energy.
Oh, yes. Okay, so I think that there's, in my thinking, there's many different reasons why constraints that have sort of produced the body shape that this animal has, and then B, the nervous system, and then the behavioral sort of repertoire that this fly produces, and all of these sort of go into why the fly crawls the way it does. And I think there's a lot to sort of discover there, but my colleague Kristen Branson's made some interesting progress there that I think, I don't know if she showed at the main conference, but she's managed to get realistic looking walking, and I don't know, I don't remember the details, but yeah.